Spoilers, you've been warned. So, the new episode came out, and surprise, surprise, they didn't mess it up as badly as I thought they would. It's actually not that bad. I actually liked it a lot on top of that. However, there are some major flaws with this episode that stop it from being as good as it could have been. However, I think this is definitely the best episode of the show so far. And arguably some of the best live-action Star Wars we've gotten out of Disney ever. But it wouldn't truly be me if I didn't roast them for the bad that happens in this episode, so prepare for that. But we'll start from the beginning of the episode. Now, straight off the back, we get a flashback to Coruscant, prior to episode 2, and then we see a badly de-aged Anakin Skywalker. However, despite the fact that he doesn't look 20 years old in this, the young Padawan Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan start preparing to spar and to train together, in the same room as the first scene in the show, where the younglings become under attack by the clones in Order 66. As they are about to clash their lightsabers, it then cuts to Vader in the present. It would seem that he's having a vision back to his training base. The captain of Vader's Imperial Star Destroyer tells him that the third sister, Reva, is here. After Reva tries to stroke Vader's ego, Vader dismisses her and then asks where is he? He is on Jabeam, as the tracker that was placed on Lola, the droid that Leia owns, is there. Vader then says, kneel. Anyone else getting Game of Thrones flashbacks?
Kneel!
Well, Vader then promotes Reva to Grand Inquisitor. Grand Inquisitor. I feel like that's going to be important later on. Fast forward to Jabeam. Roken, Sully, Leia, Kenobi, and Tala arrive. Roken shouts out that we got her, referring to Leia, and then Kenobi walks off the ship only to find a wild Haja. So sure, we didn't get to see Hondo and Naka, but hey, at least Maya's other favourite character is here. Turns out a bounty's been put in his head after his encounter with the third sister, so now he's here. Kenobi tries to get Roken to take Leia to Alderaan. However, this dialogue then triggers the next quest line for Kenobi, and he has to stay and help them get the people off of Jabeam. Kenobi, who wants to get his extra XP, accepts. On Vader's Star Destroyer, Reva and Vader are talking about locking down a facility. Reva brings up that they can hold off for days. She carries on and says, if we cannot break them, before Vader says, it is not them who we need to break. Then we cut back to Jabeam and we see Lola, who's now turned to the dark side, flying out to carry out the orders to lock down the facility. Kenobi's looking at the wall, seeing all the messages from the other Jedi, and then he sees a bunch of lightsabers. Yeah, I've got issues with this one, and let me explain. I get it, they're leaving their lightsabers behind because they want to remain anonymous when they leave through the path. But would this not compromise the path? Let's say the Empire, which definitely isn't coming right now, comes upon this base and then checks out the area, only to find a bunch of lightsabers. They can then track who owns these lightsabers. The Jedi don't have the same designs of lightsabers. Every single lightsaber is unique. If you remember my review of episode 3 and 4, where I referenced the Clone Wars arc where Ahsoka takes Padawans to Ilum to get their lightsaber crystals done, you will find out that every single Jedi has their own unique lightsaber design for them. So it'd be very easy for the Empire to then track, using the lightsabers, the Jedi who left their lightsabers. Face recognition technology is a thing in this universe, as we saw in episode 3. So them leaving the lightsabers here compromises everything, not just the path, but all the other Jedi and every one of their associates. It's very dumb, and I don't know why this is here other than to make Kenobi connect with the fact that there are other Jedi out there who survived. We obviously already know Quinn and Voss has survived, now we know there's others, as their lightsabers are just kind of there. But anyway, moving on. Lola then locks down the hangar door, and this happens right as an Imperial Star Destroyer arrives in orbit above Jabeam. Cue flashback part 2. Anakin has been too aggressive as he's fighting Kenobi. Kenobi says, a Jedi's goal is to defend life, not take it. And Anakin doesn't listen. He says mercy doesn't defeat an enemy, which is why you're going to lose. And then it cuts back to Vader looking over Jabeam. He then says to launch the attack, and the attack happens to only have 2 shuttles. The attack. You know, from his Star Destroyer that should have over thousands of stormtroopers. But instead we get 2 shuttles that probably can only take like 25 troops each. Keep that in mind, I'll cover this eventually. Kenobi then gives the members of the Path a pep talk. The plan is to lock down a facility until they escape. By the time the Empire gets in, they will be long gone. Look at good old General Kenobi.
General Kenobi!
Then the Empire lands, and yes, there's about 50 troopers. 50 stormtroopers and what? 2 purge troopers and an E-Web turret. That's the attack. Like I said before, the Star Destroyers can hold thousands of troops. Why is there only 50? And then obviously Reva lands and then shouts fire. And instead of using their lightsaber, the turret shoots the door, not doing much damage. Back inside the base, the hangar door's not opening. Eventually Haja says that he should get someone in the vents. Roken's getting a bit pissy, and then Leia says that she'll go inside the vent and ask for a ladder. Roken immediately dismisses this, which is kind of hilarious considering that I guess he understands that Leia's still a child. However, Kenobi, who I guess realizes that Leia's intelligence has been turned on for this part of the episode, validates her and says get her the ladder as I trust her. Roken then reluctantly asks for the ladder. After telling Harter to look after Leia, much to his dismay, Obi-Wan goes to respond to her call. Once he's in private, he opens the message and it's Bail Organa. And Bail literally name drops every single point of contention that they should not be talking about over a call that can be intercepted, mind you. Like, he literally says, if I don't hear from you soon, I will head to Tatooine. Owen will need help with the boy. Yes, Bail Organa said that in a message to Obi-Wan. What? Why would you do that? That's why your planet gets blown up in 10 years, mate. Jokes aside, I'm not very happy that Bail Organa just destroyed his own character. I mean, he literally started this call by saying that, I know we said no communication, but your silence worries me. Which means he understands the risk of sending this message. But he goes ahead and says it anyway, and on top of that, understands that Kenobi could have been captured by Vader. So he sends this to Kenobi, knowing that he could be captured by Vader, which would lead to Vader then finding this message, and then hearing everything that Bail just says about the children, about his brother-in-law Owen potentially having one of them at least, the boy, and on top of that about his implications in the Rebel Alliance that will later come to be, and then on top of that, the fact that he's been working with the Jedi. That will doom Alderaan, as well as any hope or chance that you could actually defeat the Empire long term. This is the biggest flaw of this episode, and depending on what happens later on in the show, it could ruin any chance of this show repairing the mess from episode 4 and 3. Anyway, moving on. Tyler then comes out of nowhere and asks Kenobi if he's alright. Kenobi says it will be. Convenient that Tyler came right after Kenobi watched the message, but whatever. Tyler then tells her story of why she ended up joining the Path. After witnessing the Inquisitors kill some Jedi, children included, she decided that she wants to fight on behalf of them. See, she's just like Kenobi. She couldn't help the people that she cared about. Some things you can't forget, but you can fight to make them better. I guess this is meant to signify that Kenobi's now regained his connection to the Force and now can fight like he could back in the day. As if they didn't do that last episode in the most contrived way possible. Kenobi then realizes that he needs to buy some time for them to escape, so he tries to get a message to Reva so that they can talk through the gate. It's also very funny to know that Reva is aware that Kenobi is the troll master, so she's like, if you're trying to stall for time, it won't work. Vader will have you at any cost. It's actually kind of funny. I guess you heard the stories of him in the Clone Wars. Kenobi then asks how Reva knew that Anakin was Vader. This then leads to him deducing that she was one of the younglings at the temple during Order 66. And finally we get to see Moses Ingram actually act. It's good to see that her acting is as good as I've heard. We then flash back to seeing the little girl, who's the first character ever seen in this entire show, being approached by Anakin. So yes, I was right. That girl was indeed Reva. Turns out that Reva hid with the bodies. Now I doubt Anakin and the 501st would have ever let that happen, but I guess it worked. I guess we'll have to go along with it. Suspension of disbelief. Obi-Wan then says that we want the same thing to Reva. Do we, Obi-Wan? Do you really want Anakin dead? And then she rips into him. Amazing acting from both of them, I've got to say, in this scene. Reva eventually then just says that she doesn't need any help and she doesn't need anyone. I guess we'll see how that goes for you. But before I carry on with the scene, I need to point out something. Remember how proximity is a thing? And this show keeps messing it up? This girl is actually almost shouting when she's getting passionate and ripping into Kenobi's failure. But at no point do the stormtroopers hear any of this, or the purge troopers, nor do the members of the Path. Were it not for the great acting in this scene, this episode would have been ruined by this. The impact of this scene alone is what stops us from being taken away from the fact that the stormtroopers, purge troopers, and the Path soldiers don't hear any of this stuff happening. Stuff that literally breaks the law if anyone finds out about it. Vader being Anakin is not something anyone should know apart from a few people. At this point, Kenobi, now Reva, Thrawn, Yoda, I think Tarkin and Sidious and Bail Organa are the only people who are aware. So perhaps find a way to write this in a way that doesn't make Reva, the new person who knows about this, shout this from the top of her lungs in front of almost 100 people. Anyway, moving on. Reva then does what she should have done from the start and uses her lightsaber to open the bloody gate. Obi-Wan then force pushes Reva back, taking some of the stormtroopers along with her. And the Path soldiers actually hold their own. It's pretty amazing. They have shields and everything. If only the Empire used their more advanced tools, like, I don't know, the turret they placed, or maybe the many, many more soldiers they probably have on that Imperial Star Destroyer. Remember, the budget for this show is $25 million per episode. You tell me they couldn't bloody CGI in more troops, or even just get more extras in the suits. Make this look more intimidating, or more believable. Have more troopers, have more purge troopers. Make them actually seem like the threat that they've been made to be. Hell, throw in an AT-AT or something. or one of those TX-130 hover tanks. Moving on, Obi-Wan and the Path troopers get pushed back. Haja is arguing with Leia, the 10-year-old girl, who is struggling to fix the hangar door. Haja then says that it's the red breaker that she should be looking for. Back in the battle, Tala and the loader droid are covering everyone's retreat. He's actually using the droid blaster from the Clone Wars, so I'm actually kind of happy to see that. But then one of the girls gets shot. Obi-Wan then comes back to the battle to actually help her. Then some more dumb choreography happens. Instead of using their blasters at range, the stormtroopers get up close to the loader droid that's purpose is carrying heavy things, which allows the loader droid to then carry up some of the stormtroopers and throw them and hit them and stuff. Meanwhile, Tala is doing pretty much the same thing and is not getting shot yet. Until she does. She gets shot in the stomach. Kenobi then remembers he's a Jedi and has a lightsaber and decides to go out and actually help. The loader droid then gets gunned down and then covers Tala before shutting down. As Kenobi starts making his way to save her, Tala shoots the door panel, locking Kenobi out. She says, "May the Force be with you." She then pulls out a thermal detonator out of nowhere and then blows herself up, alongside the loader droid. It's a good character death, and considering that we got her entire life story like 10 minutes ago, it was pretty obvious she was going to die. A note, a cliche that I've seen in many Hollywood media, specifically dramas. When you start to hear more about the characters on such an explicit level where it's not really necessary for the scene, they've essentially been marked for death, either in the current episode or the next one. Kenobi then arrives at the main hangar bit, with the other Path pilots, soldiers, and survivors. Leia's still working on the door, obviously. Remember, we got to wait for it to happen at a dramatic time where it's convenient for the plot. We then cut to Vader, who tells the captain to tell Reva to stand down, as Kenobi is already theirs. Cue flashback part 3. Obi-Wan and Anakin are doing more prequel era style fighting. It's nice, but then it gets real Clone Warsy when we see Anakin start smashing the saber down onto Obi-Wan's. It reminds me of that scene from the Clone Wars season 4 or 5, I think, on Naboo, where Anakin is trying to save the Chancellor from Dooku, and eventually kicks Dooku down onto some stairs and then starts smashing the saber down, and eventually he starts to choke Dooku before Dooku shocks him with lightning. It's a very nice nod to the Clone Wars and how they portrayed Anakin and how he liked to let loose sometimes to win, which is often his detriment. But back to the vision, Anakin locks Obi-Wan down and says, "It's over, Master. Admit you were beaten." Which then triggers Kenobi to say it's over, back in reality. After a back and forth with Roken, Obi-Wan decides to go and surrender. Anakin expects him to surrender, so that's his logic, as he will do anything he can to save those people. He then gives this lightsaber, comlink, you know, the one he used to talk to Bail Organa, that has the message on it that definitely won't be a plot point later on, and his blaster to Haja before walking out. There are other ways to fight. Meanwhile, Lola, who's turned to the dark side, is stalking Leia, who's trying to fix the door. Obi-Wan, who's been imprisoned by 2 stormtroopers, is brought to Reva, who says, "Inform Lord Vader. Kenobi is ours." Reva then says, "He's on his way. You're going to die soon." To which Kenobi then says, "You're not bringing him to me. I'm bringing him to you." Kenobi then tries to convince Reva to join him in taking out Vader. Meanwhile, in earshot of all the stormtroopers and the Purge trooper that's still alive. "What makes you think he won't see it coming? All he will see is me," Kenobi replies with. And remember, right in proximity of some stormtroopers and the Purge trooper that's still alive. Literally, 2 stormtroopers are within 2 meters of him. What was the director thinking? I'm just glad the dialogue is done well here. And then another big bad dumb happens. The 2 stormtroopers that were within 2 meters of Obi-Wan, despite the fact that Reva was having that conversation where she's literally saying that she might go along with betraying Vader, take Obi-Wan and bring him inside. Why? Why not keep him with the bulk of your troopers and yourself? It's not implied that she does this as a way for him to escape so that they can go along with taking out Vader together. So it makes no sense for this to happen. Cue flashback part 4. Obi-Wan eventually gets disarmed by Anakin. Obi-Wan then says your need for victory blinds you. Then Vader arrives on a planet. He goes to take in Obi-Wan himself. Well, you could have done that 2 episodes ago, but I guess we'll forget about that. Meanwhile, Kenobi breaks free from the 2 stormtroopers, shooting one of them after knocking the other one out. Meanwhile, Leia eventually finally finds the red breaker thing. Darkside Lola, who's been watching her do this the entire time, eventually starts just spazzing out in front of Leia. Leia eventually grabs the droid and realizes that there's a restraining bolt on top of her. After removing it, the droid's eyes turn blue again, and Leia does not pay any attention to this. Remember, Leia is meant to be a prodigy every now and then, but because of this inconsistency, this child is unaware of the fact that this droid might have been possessed by someone. I mean, I get it, she's a child. She wouldn't be able to pick up on certain concepts, but come on, the eyes were literally red before. At what point do you think, that's weird? Ben, Haja, my droid's eyes were red earlier, and she's been in here this entire time. Don't you think that's suspicious? Like, God, this kid just doesn't tell people blatantly obvious details. Like, going back to the first episode with the thing with Bail Organa, where she didn't explain why she insulted her cousin. You guys should not be making Leia unlikable. Come on. And more importantly, you should not be making her unbelievable. Anyway, once Vader walks into the base, Lola helps Leia turn on the breaker. After Obi-Wan tells her that Tala's dead, indirectly, Hajo is seen running towards the transport of all the stuff that Obi-Wan gave him. And instead of giving it back to him, he just runs and then drops the bloody communication device that Obi-Wan's been using to talk to Bail with. What's worse is that he looks back at it and then keeps running anyway. Great, destroy Hajo's character now. Sorry, Maya. Anyway, Vader, being his menacing self, walks towards the hangar area and then uses the Force to pull back down the shuttle that's trying to escape. Now, if you excuse the CGI and how bad it looks, it's actually pretty great to see Vader do this. It's rare we actually get to see Vader use the Force on things other than people's necks. And considering that the only time we've ever seen someone use the Force on a ship like this is in Legend continuity with Galen Marek, the protagonist from Star Wars The Force Unleashed. It's good to actually see a representation of his raw power seen, especially in live action, because the only other one we see is in Rebels, and I wouldn't recommend Rebels to anyone. Anyway, Vader lands the ship with the Force, and then starts ripping it apart, only to then find out that it's the wrong ship. Turns out it's the one behind it. I won't lie to you, when I first watched this I thought it was a plot hole, but then I went back and watched the scenes prior, and was reminded that there was a second ship, the one that the crew came back in the start of the episode. But because this is like a video game and Vader's Force bar has been too depleted from using his energy on the first ship, the second shuttle gets away. Cue flashback part 5. Obi-Wan disarms Anakin with the Force and takes his lightsaber. It seems the moral of this entire flashback story is that Anakin's need to prove himself is his undoing, and until he overcomes it, a Padawan he will still be. Ah, is that why he didn't get the rank of Master? It then cuts back to Vader, who I'm imagining underneath that mask is pissed. And then Reva, who thinks she's smart, sneaks up on Vader, of all people. You know, the man that you know is the chosen one and is the most powerful Force wielder alive, lightsaber in hand, and instead of trying to stab, she ignites it and goes for a slash. Vader, being Vader, uses the Force to literally hold the lightsaber in place, stopping the attack. He was wise to use you against me. And this then leads to probably the best lightsaber battle we're ever going to get in this show, where Vader literally manhandles Reva for about a minute before eventually disarming her. Bear in mind, he didn't even use his lightsaber for this, he was just using the Force and hand-to-hand combat. And spoiler for Rebels, after panicking and spinning her lightsaber around, like the Grand Inquisitor did before he died in Rebels, Vader literally uses the Force to stop it spinning and then pulls the lightsaber towards him, and then breaks the lightsaber apart and then throws the other half onto the floor. They then have a quick duel, which leads to Vader then throwing his lightsaber at Reva. Reva then deflects this and then goes to strike, to which Vader stops her with the Force again, kicks her in the leg. Force pulls the other lightsaber to his hands, which means he's now dual wielding. He then slowly walks towards Reva in a murderous fashion, before flashing back to Order 66, where he, as Anakin, walks towards her as a youngling and stabs her. It then cuts back to the present, where it's Vader doing exactly the same thing. After Reva falls to the ground, Vader puts back Reva's lightsaber and then says this interesting line. "Did you really believe I did not see it, youngling?" Meaning that he knew that that was Reva the entire time. And then suddenly, the actual Grand Inquisitor walks into the hangar bay. Which is a bloody relief, because that means that Rebels is still canon. Actually, that might not be a good thing. But at least they haven't broken continuity in this regard, at least. There's still other continuity errors, such as Leia knowing who Obi-Wan is. But anyway, the Grand Inquisitor says, "Revenge does wonders for the will to live, don't you think?" After repeating the gutter line from the second episode, the Grand Inquisitor takes back his Grand Inquisitor pin, and then he and Vader leave. Now, did they forget that the same Grand Inquisitor also got stabbed in the stomach and survived? Why don't they think that Reva would do the same thing? Come on! Why are they doing this? It was going so well! Finish the job! God! Stop trying to be edgy! Learn from what happened to you and kill her! They keep doing this! Anyway, on the ship that the Path is using, Broken sits down at Kenobi to tell him that the hyperdrive is down. So wait, you mean to tell me that the hyperdrive is down and there's an Imperial Star Destroyer that belongs to bloody Vader not too far away from you? Cool, I buy this. But why didn't they have ships already airborne ready to take out this ship? You mean to tell me that Vader's own Star Destroyer didn't have fighters just sitting around? They should have shot this ship down time ago. But I guess we're doing The Last Jedi, where the ship must go away without hyperspace travel. And look at what that did for your franchise, Disney. Where will you learn? Back in the base in Jabim, Reva, who obviously hasn't died yet, finds Obi-Wan's communication device and sees the bloody transmission that Bail Organa stupidly sent to him. Yes, that's what this all led to. Mate, bloody Vader was in the same bloody hangar area. Imagine if he found it. This has got to be the most contrived thing in the show, and I'm not lying. I think this trumps all the other crap from the last episode and the episode before. Actually, no, nothing beats Leia's feet popping out of a trench coat. But still, come on. Anyway, Obi-Wan senses this in the Force and knows that something's up. The scene then cuts to Luke, who's lying in his bed, and then that's the end of the episode. So yeah, there's some dumb crap in this episode, but overall, I'd argue that this is probably the most enjoyable episode, even more than the first episode. I say that personally, subjectively, I think this episode for me was like a 7.5, maybe an 8 out of 10. However, there are major objective flaws in this episode that stop it from being considered really, really good. So I'd probably give this a 5.5, maybe a 6 out of 10. There's just too many issues with this show. And it's a shame because there are some really, really good moments in it. I don't know if the next episode will repair the show. I don't think it will, looking at it. The fact that Leia is aware that Obi-Wan and Ben are the same breaks the original trilogy anyway. I don't know, maybe Leia gets a concussion at some point. Guess we'll have to wait and see. By the way, I've had a cold whilst recording this, so sorry if the audio is a bit messy, or if I sound like bloody Squidward right now. It's tough, but I wanted to get this video out. And obviously Maya the Bubbly One is helping me edit this, so thank you to her. So yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see next week to see how this all ends. Will it end well? Will it end badly? Will they somehow repair the mistakes of the 3rd and 4th episode? Or will I be crying and saying I'll never watch Star Wars again, even though I'm probably going to force myself to watch it anyway, because I'm just a glutton for punishment, I guess. I guess we'll have to see after episode 6, when we'll be able to look at things in perspective. Because, you know, hindsight is such a wonderful thing.